a lot of the wars in the world and a lot of the greed and corruption and a lot of the evil in the world is the result of us ultimately shutting down our individual humanistic capacity to feel happy, joy, orgasm, pleasure. And it's that negation and contraction in each one of our organisms that accumulates into this collective fascism. Wilhelm Reich, he talks about how the fascism in our world and the corruption in our world on a larger scale, it all comes back down to these individual members in society's dysfunction, their inability to feel pleasure, to lean into vulnerability, to cry, to express their emotions, and ultimately their inability to have good orgasms. Because, if everybody was really having really good orgasms, who's going to fight? Why are we fighting?
Welcome to the Somatic Pleasure Podcast, where the body is the teacher and sensation is the path. I'm your host, James Humecky. This is a space where breath slows, skin listens, and we enter the raw, unfiltered currency of intimacy, desire, and embodied truth. This space isn't sanitized, it's real. Some of what we touch on may be explicit and not suitable for children. So, if you're ready to feel all of it, come on in. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Somatic Pleasure Podcast. My name is James Humecky and I'm your host. I've been into doing these podcasts now for quite a while, and the question that comes up all the time is, how can I support you and how can I support this work? And the best way that you can do that right now is by subscribing to the channel, liking the episode, sharing with your friends, and dropping a comment. I would really appreciate that support from you. Thank you. Today, I'm going to be interviewing Ian Wilkerson. Ian's work sits at the intersection of music, breath, and embodied healing. As a third-generation Reichian breathworker and board-certified music therapist, his life's work honors lineage, creativity, and the capacity of the human body to heal through sound, expression, and sensation. This conversation is an invitation into how music, breath, and therapeutic presence unlock deeper emotional landscapes and reclaim authentic voice. I hope you get out as much out of it as I do. Ian, hey, thanks for showing up here on the Somatic Pleasure Podcast. It's really good to see you. And where exactly are you right now?
I am in Meridian, Idaho.
Idaho. All right.
Yes, sir.
And what I understand, though, is you also have an office in the Bay Area. Is that true?
Yes, I have an office in Santa Rosa, California. I maintain an office space in Santa Rosa, California, and I have a thriving caseload, music therapy and breathwork therapy caseload in Santa Rosa, California.
Excellent. That means I can actually get to see you maybe sometime in person. Catch you in Santa Rosa at some point. I would look forward to that. I want to just kind of dive into your history and what brought you into this combination of music and breath and the Reichian breathwork. And, those are all separate, but yet combined kind of questions. And, it's years of practice from what I understand. And I'd like to just hear what your learnings are, your lessons from, something like 14,000 hours of practice, if I read that correct. And let's just dive in.
Yeah.
What brought you here to this moment and this combination of work?
To this moment and this combination of work. Well, I think first and foremost, I owe a lot of it to my mother. And my upbringing with her, which was just really blessed and kind of unconventional in terms of common child rearing and parenting practices. So I owe a lot of the life I'm living to her. I mean, just even her birthing me, of course, and perhaps it's more ancestral and bigger than just the body that I'm in right now. And I do feel that also in my philosophy and my beliefs. But in this body and vessel now, I owe a lot of it to my mom and the upbringing I had, which was really quite progressive and sexually healthy, a lot of awareness of human sexuality, a lot of openness to the human experience, to expressing, to feeling, to fully leaning into our senses and into our needs to cry and scream and not contract and shut down when we're feeling something intense. Um, and I had a lot of freedom to feel, and then I had a lot of modeling. My mom was incredibly emotionally expressive. When she was mad, you knew very much there, and when she was happy and jovial and loving, you knew it. And when she was sad and she knew to cry, I mean, I grew up with a mom who would cry at the drop of a drop of a hat, just for being happy, like just because she felt elated in joy, she would cry. And so I also have that capacity in me to really lean into my tears and into my natural, physiologically um, poised capacity to cry. I mean, it's such an autonomic, healthy mechanism we have in our body to emote through tears and through crying and laughter too, and we shut it down so much as right from birth. We're constantly being told to shush and to contract. So I think I owe it the most to not being told to shush when I was a baby and not being taught to contract when I was a baby, because those formidable years in our nervous system's development, in our child development, physiological development, from birth to 3, 4, 5, but those first years, the birth to 3, is when our musculature and our nervous system is really getting the blueprint for how the rest of our life is going to unfold in terms of our health and our happiness, and our sexual health. And my mom was a Tantrika, and she taught Tantra, and she did women's sensuality workshops and brought women together, taught them how to feel their pleasure and orgasm, and how to examine and become comfortable with their vulvas. And she also did couples training for Tantra, and then she was the Reichian therapist as well, so that's a different field. That was the breath work that she did. Of course, breath work can dovetail into the Tantra, but she did straight up breath work sessions with people and worked on emotional release and trauma release. And yeah, that's what I grew up in. So I think I owe where I'm at now to that. I mean, I literally would come home from school. My mom would see clients doing breath work, one-on-one sessions, and having somebody down the hall in her office on the bed, naked, screaming their head off, bloody murder, was a normal occurrence for me. Okay. So like I had no qualms. Like when people cry or become emotional now,
Right.
in my life or around me, when I'm providing services to other people, or even out in public, or when my own children cry, or when there's big, robust, affective, emotional experiences, my nervous system's pretty cool with it. And so that's what I grew up in, was the normalization and the acceptance and the empathy and compassion of it being okay for people to be angry and to rage in a healthy capacity, in an appropriate way. I mean, obviously, we're not going to condone people using their rage in a violent way out in society. That's not good, but we need to be given permission to lean into our uncomfortable feelings. So that's what I grew up in.
Absolutely. Wow, Ian, that just sounds like a a beautiful soup to grow up in, and a way of yeah, I think what you said about your nervous system is trained to be able to hold big emotions, whether it's yours or other people's, watching other people and not get derailed by it. And I think that's a really important piece of just being human. And, maybe you agree with me, I don't know, but, we've cut ourselves off so much from what we are naturally, again, with the shushing, quieting the emotions, don't demonstrate. And, one of the threads that I wanted to pick up in there that wasn't spoken about specifically was, as a man in this culture, being able to emote and to accept and receive big feelings. Do you have any thoughts around that? Because to me, I'm in men's groups and whatnot, and I
Mm-hmm.
see how this works.
Yeah.
And how men, tend to kind of hold in a little bit. So, or not.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a huge piece to our societal and humanity's dysfunction is this idea that the warrior or masculinity isn't soft also, that it isn't also sensitive, or that it isn't also um uh warm, like that this masculinity has to be rigid, and
Right.
that the idea of strength is the opposite of the capacity to feel and have emotion. And it's not true. It's not true at all. And we're taught that generally we're taught that in society that the man has to be strong and don't cry and suck it up. And I mean, I'm all for people not being snowflakes. Like I'm
Right.
not saying we shouldn't, I'm not saying that all of humanity shouldn't have a strong constitution and be resilient. Like a healthy organism is resilient. A healthy organism, a healthy human is capable of enduring a lot of shit and being strong and really, being challenged and rising up to those challenges. But that doesn't mean that a man can't be strong and sensitive. And in fact, for me, I've always taught and embraced, and even now in the development of my personal brand, I'm really trying to highlight and put out there that men can cry, like to help teach men to cry, and that it's okay to lean into their true authentic selves. And knowing when you've got to be the warrior, and when you do need to suck it up and fight something or persevere or be that strong stabilizing force for your family or your friends, like that's prevalent also in our chemistry and in our ancestry, like that we are
Absolutely.
typically the hunters in the primitive world. We were, and the women are typically the female apes, and the female um members of the organism or early hominids were the home bearers and the home nurturers and the ones who took care of the kiddos and helped with the food or weaved the baskets while the men were out hunting. So there is a lot of like genetic coding
Sure.
and prevalence in our lineage. But I would argue that the real warriors who went out and killed the buffalo, or who went out and killed an animal to feast, they still wept.
Yeah.
They still kneeled down and loved the animal for feeding their family. And they still had the capacity to, after they made that kill, they still wept. They still paid their respects to honoring and loving and feeling the sorrow for taking that life. Maybe not all tribes and not all primitive people, but I do believe that there were those warriors who did that. And I've read some stories where there are examples of like, indigenous folks and tribal people. They did weep and say prayers for the fallen animal. And that's the
Mhm.
kind of sensitivity that I believe the modern day warrior has lost, is like this ability to bring in the sensitive side, to bring in their tears. And that does not negate or invalidate them as a warrior. It doesn't make them weak, you know.
Ian, we could do a whole podcast just on this topic. I know it.
Yeah.
I mean, I was in the military, and I grew up in a really kind of rough and tumble home, 5 brothers, and
Mm.
a very strong father, and I have strong men in my life as friends, and you know, there's it's really beautiful to watch and be present with and to be held when men are emoting in some way, whether it's sadness from the loss, whether it's joy, celebration, whether, whatever it is. And it is different, through the biology, and, tends to be a little more intense sometimes, but it's just, thank you for talking about that and bringing all of that in, because it is a very powerful place for men to allow themselves to go. And it actually is, it seems to me like a reclamation of power. It's the shutting down and the deep stoicism that often makes a man less powerful, in my opinion. But
Totally, man. Yeah.
so I want to, go ahead, please. Yeah.
No, just that you just mentioned it's that shutting down, and it's, I mean, I believe that shift, I mean, we could go down deep into the rabbit hole of like ancient society, and when it was a matriarch versus a patriarch, and the patriarchal society coming in, and men feeling threatened by the leadership of the women, and then the men seizing the power, and then, I mean, there's a whole bunch of prevalent historical
like you
stuff
said, that's a deep rabbit hole that we
but I think that there's a part of it's very prevalent. So as to why, and in terms of the shit we're in now with, a lot of the wars in the world, and a lot of the greed and corruption, and the, a lot of the evil in the world is the result of us ultimately shutting down our individual humanistic capacity to feel happy, joy, orgasm, pleasure. And it's that negation and contraction in each one of our organisms that accumulates into this collective fascism. And Wilhelm Reich wrote all about fascism, and there's one of his books. He probably mentions fascism in a few of his books. But listen, little man might go deep into it. But he talks about how the fascism in our world and the corruption in our world on a larger scale, it all comes back down to these individual members in society's dysfunction, their inability to feel pleasure, to lean into vulnerability, to cry, to express their emotions, and ultimately their inability to have good orgasms. Because, if everybody was really having really good orgasms, who's going to fight? Why are we fighting?
Exactly.
Like, how do you feel after like an incredible full body orgasm? Who wants to fight after that? Like,
right, exactly.
I mean,
right, exactly.
So,
and it can just be loving touch. You know what I mean?
Of course.
It can be sexual, non-sexual, but
Of course.
we don't have enough of that.
Well, the full body orgasm is not just genital focused.
Right.
It's the full nervous system. And the majority of us in the world are having localized orgasms, even if they feel good and they're really good. Like, ejaculation is not synonymous
it's just
with
here and no place else.
Yeah. And so, the ultimate state of ecstasy is to have the streaming of orgone energy from toe to head, where the orgasm's physiological biochemical function in our body is for tension release. It's to release tension. And our bodies need to release tension to have homeostasis. It's a tension release, tension release, tension release. And we don't release because we keep it in, we contract our emotions, and we don't have good orgasms. So there's no release. It's just tension, 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 tension.
Well, even in the realm of like ejaculation, even female ejaculation, where that we've confused or the arousal and orgasm with ejaculation and
correct
that kind of a thing, and
absolutely
to be able to pull all those pieces apart and then understand them in their proper context is really powerful.
Yep.
And one person, a friend we have in common, Sirgyan Singh, who actually was the first. He talked a lot about your mom. They had a pretty deep connection.
Yep.
And I might be completely wrong, but I feel like I met her one time up here in Mendocino many, many years ago.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
In a circle. I have that recollection, and I'd have to confirm that with Sirigyan. But to get past what that end of the question I was going to ask with that, but we have this common, this friend in common that introduced us,
Mm-hmm.
and you two are going to be doing a retreat coming up in September, and I want to talk about that in a minute. But
Mm-hmm.
I, one of the things that Sergyan would introduced me to the Reichian breath work and introduced me to the movement with the breath and the lifting of the hips and the dropping of the pelvis and the deep breath and the the emoting or the verbalization, the sounding, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And it, incredibly powerful work. And I went to a retreat that he did in not Anderson Valley, Philo, many years
Mm-hmm.
ago as well. And so, I've gotten to work with him a lot, and I've gotten to experience this work. But I'd like to find out what your experience with the Reichian breath work specifically, and how that ties into our sexuality and into the nervous system regulation, those
Mm-hmm.
kinds of things. And then later on, I want to
Yeah.
find out how you integrate that into your music therapy, if you do, that kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. I do integrate. I am a board certified music therapist, and I'm also a breathwork coach. I do tend to take the title breathwork therapy out of it because in modern day society, everybody wants to make sure that people are credentialed, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a licensed clinical psychologist. I'm a music therapist, a credentialed board certified music therapist, and I'm a third generation breathwork practitioner. So I call myself a breathwork coach as opposed to a breathwork therapist. But in my experience, in doing Reichian therapy myself, like me being the receiver and the one having the regular weekly ongoing practice with a Reichian therapist or breathwork coach, it's quite a lot to talk about. I'm trying to figure out where to start. So I think I'll start with the first thing I learned by receiving and engaging in the Reichian breathwork practice myself was how to just surrender to my breath and be still and present with it. And the first thing I confronted is the resistance. We call it the resistance. And it's our neuroses and it's our contraction and it's the dark side of the force or the dysfunction and unhealthy capacity in our body to sabotage feeling. It's what Reiki called pleasure anxiety. So when you fully breathe and breathe really deep, consciously and rapidly, without letting your armoring and your contraction stifle your breath, and you reteach your body how to anatomically and physiologically fully breathe deep inhales and deep oxygenating breaths. When you do that, you start to awaken your body's natural capacity for homeostasis or to do whatever it needs to do to find balance.
Mm-hmm.
And we get in the way, our cerebral process and our brains get in the way of our body's innate capacity to find that balance, to find homeostasis. And when I was first learning about experiencing it, is really about getting my head to be quiet and to not allow my neuroses or my dysfunction or the contraction or what Wright called the resistance or pleasure anxiety, not allowing it to distract me or derail me from just breathing. And it sounds so simple when you say, oh, we're just going to breathe for an hour, but it's really hard to breathe for a half hour or 45 minutes straight with very intentional motor movements and synchronized breathing patterns. All kinds of stuff starts to happen. You start to twitch and something itches and, oh, I got a dry throat. No, I got to go pee. And there's all kinds of things that seem seemingly appropriate and okay that's going to pull us away from breathing. But really it's our nervous system and our body's push and resistance to not just breathe. And it's almost like a meditative practice to just surrender to the breath. And then the other piece that I think is really important in talking about is the physiology of oxygenating. Our bodies are whatever percent oxygen. It's how we breathe. It's how we live. It's how we feel. All of our cells need oxygen. And so when we breathe consciously and we really, really start to undo and reteach the body how to bring in oxygen into our body, even within a half an hour session, 45-minute session, deep, deep breathing consciously, we're sending much more elevated levels of oxygen into the body. And so we're saturating our tissues with oxygen, and that saturation in oxygen starts to wake up the nervous system, and it starts to wake up and unlock the diaphragm and unlock all of the muscular mechanisms in the body that stuff the anger and stuff the sadness or stuff the irritability. And it starts to like chip away. It's like chiseling away at the body's armoring. And as we start to loosen that up and soften it and loosen the diaphragm up, the stuff that wasn't allowed to come out starts to come out. And it can be laughter, it can be good feelings, it could be rage, it can be sadness. And then just leading into the permission to feel those. And now here's where I feel like the Reichian therapy is Reich was like the forefather of kinesthetic, breath-based psychotherapeutic practices in the Western world, right? I mean, breath work is like way more ancient in the Eastern world, and it's we can't say that Reich's totally the forefather of breathwork practices. But in the Western world, he was one of the first psychoanalytical therapists back with Freud. He was a pupil of Freud. He learned from Freud, and then he ended up realizing through his own research analysis that the cerebral psychoanalytical process wasn't it. That like if you don't deal with the shit that's in the body and you don't deal with the contraction, then you could just talk about the problems till your face turns blue and not necessarily still really get to a resolution because you're not dealing with the foundational mechanism, the musculature, the nervous system. I mean, they're tied together, and I would never suggest somebody doesn't talk, and I would never suggest that talk therapy and traditional therapies aren't valuable. Like I'd say it's a balance and a blend. But anyway, so Reich didn't feel congruent with Freud. He went his own way, and he kind of, is the Western psychotherapeutic psychotherapy forefather of the Western kinesthetic stuff like Rolfing and other body-based somatic Western practices. But the reason why I'm bringing that up is because he was all about poking the bear. Okay. So a lot of the breathwork practices are all about like going inward and activating the parasympathetic. And absolutely, there's a lot of research that talks about how important the parasympathetic nervous system is for anabolic rebound and for a healthy tissue and all that stuff. And that's all legit, in my opinion, as well. But if we just go straight to the inward, if we try to bypass the sympathetic nervous system, if we try to bypass its need to release and its need to be freaking fervorous and ferocious, and we're pretty much just doing the same thing. We're just stuffing it and contracting, and we're moving past it, and we're not giving it its due respect, and we're not giving it its due need for surrendering to it and processing it. So that's where the Reichian therapy comes in, and that's the scariest part for people, is because it's a lot easier for people to come in and be like, okay, we're going to do some nose breathing and just really activate a calm state. Okay. Because nobody wants to feel the shit. But the Reichian breathwork that I'm doing and that Siri Gian and I are inviting in these retreats and in our practices is to really challenge people to unlock that need to scream really loud and to unlock the need to cry really deeply. Because if we don't release that and we just go straight to the parasympathetic activation, we're just bypassing the problems. We're still going to have pathology. The trauma is not being dealt with. It's not being released. We need to release the demon, release the beast, let it out, and then we can fall into a greater state of balance and pleasure and activation of the parasympathetic. So it's the yin and yang. You need both, and that's what I learned.
So that
in my upbringing.
that brings me, and thank you for all of that, because that gives a good picture of what happens in a session or what might happen in a retreat with you, or doing this kind of work with anybody really. So but what comes up for me, and what a question is, twofold. One is, how do you prepare people for that kind of release? I mean, I've led breath circles. I've been involved in many of them. I've done, again, like the Reichian work. So I'm really familiar with it. And, I've seen people go into states and become very afraid,
Mm-hmm.
or get stuck, or, all of a sudden they're in this, I am God kind of, they've, they're not prepared to handle the release. And then there's, then there's the integration piece, which you alluded
Mm-hmm.
to, coming back into the parasympathetic and the slower breathing and whatnot. So I'd like to see, can you map out like where you would take somebody, or in a retreat, how you would do that, the build up, the preparation into the heavy breath sessions, and then the integration piece?
Yeah. So when we're in a group setting, it's a little different than when we're in a one-on-one setting.
Mm-hmm.
But generally the cadence or the pacing of the experience is predominantly dictated by the person who's doing the breathing and the group, the collective. So one, and I'll take you through some examples, but like, just to speak to that, like, I'm not, my role as a breathwork therapist or coach, and my role as a coach or my role as a music therapist, it is not to do it for them or tell them how to do it. It is to facilitate their process, right? And so the reason why I'm saying that is because how it ebbs and how it flows and what the cadence looks like is going to be a feedback loop. Uh, so it's really going to be, Sirigian and I observing and feeling and sensing the energy of the room that helps guide us into which door we can open. Obviously we have a plan, and obviously we have a variety of skills and interventions and experiences that we can pull from, and we have an itinerary, but we'll quickly skip to the next two things on the itinerary and go do something else based on what we're observing.
Right.
Is a few of the members in the group having such a big meltdown, or such a big crisis in a release or fear or whatever, that we need to pivot and do something a little different. So, but in general, the way a retreat looks like, this intensive coming up, is, we start the experience together as a collective, and we have a group check-in and a powwow. We talk about privacy and safety and anonymity in the group, and we talk about where people are coming from. We have a go around. We ask people to introduce themselves. So we really, from the very beginning of the experience, try to foster a greater sense of community and connection, so that these people who maybe don't know each other can at least feel a little bit more connected and safe to be vulnerable around people. But that's a part of the beauty of this work too in the retreats, is that the unknown and the scare and the scary part of it is, yeah, it is scary to be vulnerable around anybody. And for some people, it's scary to be vulnerable about the people who are closest to them. And for some people, it's scarier for them to be vulnerable around strangers. It really depends on each person, right? But we try to foster that sense of connection. We have a group opening circle. We might chant together, do some stretching together, do a little light yoga together. And then we take a short break and we dive right into our first breath session, like within, after the first hour and a half of starting the retreat. And then we'll, after that, it's, we usually will break for dinner, because we start the retreat in the afternoon. So we'll have an opening circle around like 3:00. And then by like 4:30, we're diving into our breath session. And Sirigian and I are giving guidance and verbally facilitating and teaching people on the specific techniques and breathing patterns that we're inviting them to do. And predominantly, the majority of the Reichian breathwork breathing exercises that we invite people to do are mouth-based breathing. We're inviting their body into a space of activating the sympathetic nervous system, of giving their body just oxygenate. We're just inviting them to oxygenate more. Our mouth is a larger orifice. Our nose doesn't bring as much oxygen into our body. So we're inviting them, and a lot of Reich's breathing practices were all mouth-based, because we want to increase the amount of oxygen we can bring in one breath, right?
Right.
So we can bring in more with our mouth. And so we do a lot of teaching and hand over hand support and, instructing on breathing fully into their diaphragm and into their stomach. And so the first session's really for people who are not repeat attendees, for people who are new to it, we will even spend more time teaching them about these different movements and breathing patterns that we're inviting them to do. And I say inviting because, again, I'm not there to tell anybody what to do or how to do it. I'm inviting them and hoping to teach them and facilitate their
Right.
experience. So, and then so we break for dinner, and then the subsequent days are a combination of check-in, and then pranayama yoga and more motor yoga, kundalini yoga practices and stretching and rapid motor movements. And when we do the rapid motor movements and when we do the pranayama yoga, the kundalini yoga, those sessions, so we have a variety of like 1 hour or 90-minute experientials, and they're all going to be a little different, but we have a clear distinction between the yoga, breath-based yoga experientials, and then we have the breathwork Reichian therapy experientials. And that's what's so powerful about this intensive and these retreats with Sirigan and I, is that we do. Oh, and then we bring in the music and the drumming. So it's really multimodal. We're activating and diving into all aspects of the nervous system and into the experience. So when we're doing the pranayama yoga or kundalini yoga breath exercises, those are nose-based, because that's the kundalini practice, is that you're doing a lot of, nostril breathing and different things with your rotations or shoulder shrugs, or, there's a lot of different movements with the kundalini yoga and the pranayama yoga. And
Well, I
those are,
think that's what I was asking about, is like, what are the supporting practices, you could call them, or the foundations, things that somebody can come back to if they get super activated and they want to like pull it back, or,
right.
Once they get activated, they have a way of navigating that. And what I'm
Yeah.
hearing is through the yoga and the pranayama based breath and the nose breathing. And, I know Sirigan to be, just exceptional at that. And I'm imagining that you probably are too, not having experienced your work in person, but
yeah.
And then so like I mean, what I'm understanding is how that trajectory works throughout the whatever it is, 4 days, 5 days,
The cadence. Yeah. It's
the
progressive,
cadence of it,
and it
yeah.
depends. It
And
depends
then
on the
then then
person.
then there's like the integration piece, which also includes probably yoga and breath work as well, or how does that work for you guys?
Well, we integrate in a variety of ways. We integrate with touch, and Sirigan and I will go around the room and provide light touch and rocking and
Right.
muscular manipulation and head holding and occiput holding and light cranial work. But the way that we would support somebody in crisis is like, the last few workshops I've done, there's been some major breakdowns where they're like, I don't know if I can do this. And I'm like, they're like, convulsing and like super scared. And really the way we support that process is we will go up to the person and we will hold space for them and actually be there for them and, ask them what they need. If they can't speak what they need, we'll use our intuition and our experience to provide them with the touch that could support them grounding a little bit or not being in such a fight or flight experience. But there's also something that is important to note, is that it's important for them to just be in the fight or flight experience. They need to will very intentionally not interrupt, because it's okay to be scared. It is okay to be angry. It's okay to be convulsing. And part of our responsibility is helping them with just providing a safe space of, holding that space, being present with them, but not involving ourselves enough to where we stop it, because I don't want to stop it. I want to let them keep going until I have the sense that, okay, now, they really need me to step in. Yeah. So it's how do we integrate touch, contact, some verbal prompting and a reassurance that we are there and that we're right here with you right now. Like, you're doing great right now. This is a part of the process. We, really just, it's okay to be feeling what you're, so a little bit of verbal at that point. And then also after a session, like after an actual Reichian breath session, we use stillness and rest. We ask them to just lay there and rest and sleep. And after an hour breath session of pounding and screaming and breathing, fucking tired. Your
Yeah.
body is tired. I mean, you're just tired. I mean, you're like, okay, whew, we're done. Okay, like
Well,
it's
sometimes
time.
that's half the therapy is just, working your body out and getting it, into that state of, exhaustion, but that kind of exhaustion that can put you into a deep
Yes.
rest and a deep
Sleeping
sleep.
like a
You know what I
baby.
mean? Yeah,
Sleeping like a
exactly.
baby.
Even if you don't
So,
have the big emotional
oh yeah,
releases, it's really we don't move enough in this world.
it is very
We
physical.
just don't move enough. And I remember that. I also remember a few things, like the, belly work and then guided work in the jaw with a partner. That's amazing. That's amazing. I
Yeah.
mean, I use that in my work all the time, but um, the this retreat, and I hope anybody listening here will, the what is the date of that next retreat? It's September 4th, right?
Yeah, it
No.
is September 4th to 7th
Okay.
in Kenwood, California. And
Kenwood,
it's
right.
called Fall into Feeling.
Hey there. I am so glad you're here, and I hope you're enjoying the show. And if you are, be sure and hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. You know the drill, and it really helps us out. And if something hits home or you have a question, please leave a comment. I look forward to the interactions, and I read them all. Thank you so much. And now, on with the show. And we'll put that information at the end and in the show notes. But I want to kind of move on to another subject. I want to move on more like into your music work. I mean, you've been doing this for 16 plus years, right? And just tell us a little bit about what that music therapy is, and then maybe we can go into like how you've integrated the breath work and stuff into it. But first off, just your work. How you doing?
Yeah. So, from the pedagogy of becoming a board certified music therapist in the Western world of allopathic medicine, which is where I got my degree and the mechanism of governing that I operate within. I just have to say that because it's like healing through music is so ancient. It's way more ancient than, but in the music therapy world that I live in right now as a board certified music therapist, that emerged in the, post World War I and post World War II, like in the veterans' homes, like traveling minstrels going in to make music with VA, with veterans. And that's how it kind of got its first foothold in modern allopathic medicine in terms of like being a rehabilitative support.
Wow, I had no idea that it went back that far.
Yeah, in the Western medicine world, right?
Sure.
But so music therapy is the like clinical application and use of music experiences by a credentialed board certified music therapist with with a plan and an assessment and a treatment plan and goals and objectives and benchmarks for outcomes and reevaluations and reassessments, right? So that's the pedagogy. That's what it wants to put forth. But it's also very spiritual, very phenomenological, idealistic, and creative and expressive. And that's what brings me to it, and that's what bridges the gap into breath work.
Mm-hmm.
And what I do in music therapy is I use creativity and expression to help empower and lift up the people I'm serving, to help them grow through their own creative process and through their own musical expression. So I'm not
You're
as
not
much.
really a music teacher, like necessarily.
Well, I am a teacher
You are,
also.
but I mean, in the therapy part, it's not necessarily about. Am I understanding that right?
You're correct. So as a music therapist, I have musical goals, which is the acquisition, skill set acquisition in music. So there's always teaching. I also have non-musical goals. So if I'm working with, I have a robust caseload of people with brain injuries. So I do rehabilitative work
Okay.
through music.
Yeah.
Okay. And when I'm doing that, so there's such a vast world that you can heal through music, right? Like music can be like really targeted and clinical, where we're like working on rehabilitation and habilitation. And a huge part of my caseload in the music therapy world is like kids with special needs, children and adults. So I'm
Right.
helping them how to speak, helping them learn how to manage their sensory integration, you know, helping them come to terms with their own sensory needs because they have autism and they have all these crazy nervous system issues, and they, you know, they need help to integrate their sensory world, the world around them. Or I'm working with like behavioral problems with people who have like severe oppositional defiance behaviors, or I'm working with, so I have such a robust caseload, James. And so when I'm working in a clinical rehabilitative capacity, I'm helping people who've lost their faculties to speak and to walk, or to have cognitive capacity, or executive functioning might be stifled. And so I'm working with them through musical experiences, through helping them drum, bringing out their singing capacity, helping them learn how to play piano. So there's a lot of global domain areas in how we function physiologically, emotionally, and spiritually. There's a lot of ways that we function as humans that can be lifted up and supported through the act of making music. And it's important to say that because there's two different pedagogies in healing worlds. There's the sound healing world, which is like psychoacoustics and a lot more about quantum mechanics. And it's more about a
Okay.
passive receiving of music. Okay, that's the sound healing world. And there's schools and certificates and training for
Sure.
that. And it's an ancient art form too in healing. And then there's the music therapy pedagogy track, which is more about doing. It's more about interactive experiential engagement. And it's
Mhm.
more about curating and supporting their own connection to their music, to the music they love, to helping them talk about their problems through lyric writing, or grabbing their favorite songs and saying, okay, well, why are these lyrics meaningful to you? Let's analyze the lyrics. Or let's compose your own song, or let's take your favorite song that has this really powerful meaning to you and let's put your lyrics into it with the same
Wow.
melody and do some substitution, and then let's record it. And you have this product after, 3 months of collaborating. And now, you've been able to process this trauma through your own creative process. So that's a way that it can look also. So there's just
That is amazing, Ian. I mean, that I wouldn't have thought that it had so many, the music therapy, like you said, pedagogical, that it would have so many pieces to it that, I mean, God, yeah, being able to write your own song, or, analyze the lyrics, and and I like that part you're saying about it being a doing, where like a sound healing or a sound bath, or that is a passive reception, and I've been in some powerful sessions with that, but to actually do it and move it, I played trumpet when I was in high school.
And I want to say something about the passive thing, because I've gone down this discussion with some sound healers, and then the discussion becomes, well, it's not passive. And it's true. There's more than meets the eye, right? Like
Mhm.
sound healing world, sound baths, like there's still a feedback loop. There's argument to say that
Okay.
like the sound bath practitioner still is making observational analysis and decisions based on the energy exchange, right? Like what is
Mhm.
passive, what's active? But there's a big difference between the pedagogies and the experiences, in that, like, when a client comes into work with me, I want to activate their gross motor movement. I want to get them drumming. I want to get them speaking to me and interacting and talking about their creativity and their favorite songs and teaching them piano. So that's the active experiential component I'm talking about
Right.
versus the sound bath.
Now, do you
Um,
bring any of that into like the retreat setting, so people
yes,
get in and start? Okay.
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
I do. Very much. I'm going to fix my camera. It didn't follow me. There we go. So the way that we bring the creative process into the breathwork retreat, into this upcoming retreat, is I'm kind of I've created a little bit of a rhythmic way to support the breathing experience. And so I will use spontaneous improvised drumming
Mhm.
during some of the breathwork experiences as a supportive aural uh, cue and stimulus, and also as a way to empower permission for people to tap into the big, robust expression, because the drum has this primal capacity in our ancestry, in our roots, and in our brainstem, in our most primitive capacity of our neuro functioning, where our rhythm centers are in our brainstem. So it's this primal permission. So it's can be easier for people to have their loud voices masked by, or subtly veiled by, drumming. And so I'll add active live drumming improvised, and that improvisation is a reciprocal feedback loop, because I'm improvising my drum based on what the collective group is giving me in their, what I'm observing their bodies doing, where am I seeing them contracted, who's freaking out, who's screaming really loud, who just went, and then I'm going to go, and like really, like I'm almost like echoing back some of their streams or their rhythms. And I'm looking for ways to connect their breath and their motor movement to the drumming also.
That's amazing. I was a number of years ago, I was in Nicaragua, and I was at a little retreat, and this woman she was doing drumming circle, but more like this, it was like everybody, had something, whether it was a bucket or sticks or whatever it was, everybody had something to do it. And, in some ways it was kind of like a call and response, and what do they call it, like circle singing, the communal singing. And so this section here is doing that section doing that, and up and down and quiet and loud, but it, you felt the energy build, and then there was like using your voice, and pretty soon, it was like people are shouting, and there was some crying possibly, and there was, but it was just like you can feel that energy in a group. I think especially too, it was my experience. But what you're talking about is just so reminiscent of these experiences and the power of that, like you actually being the one that's hitting on the thing, the drum, the motor skills, and then using your voice and the breath work in that, so.
Yeah. And you said something just now that the exact words had not been mentioned yet, which was to build up the energy. You said they're building up that energy, and that's what it is. We're building up that energy. We're building the energy. We're building, and then giving it an opportunity to discharge.
Right. And having that container, right, is just so valuable, because it seems to me that somebody who, let's say they're in another kind of group that doesn't have the container, doesn't have any direction to it, will maybe wallflower, they're not going to want to like really emote. But in that container, it seems to me that more people have more permission, because it's just part of the process. And I think that's really valuable in my opinion, because it just gives somebody an opportunity to do something that they may not have ever felt the opportunity to do. And I think it's so valuable to that nervous system regulation piece, and the expansion of our capacity to hold, like you were talking about with growing up in that household. Your nervous system is expanded, and it has this capacity to hold and feel and not get thrown off track. I think to me, that's one of the bigger value points of the work that you're doing.
Yeah, it really is about finding a balanced, healthy nervous system and a healthy organism, and really being able to feel pleasure. Which is why I was so excited to be invited onto your podcast, because I'm like, it really comes down to
pleasure. What?
It really comes down to pleasure, and we literally walk around in our lives sabotaging pleasure. Like it's like our neuroses and our contraction is, and right, I'm gonna bring it up again. Pleasure anxiety. What is that? Well, it's when we're too anxious to try to lean into feeling good. It's like, who would have thought that we did that? But we're always sabotaging our desires and
there's a couple of things with that word. Is first off, it's kind of, in some ways, it's almost become like a dirty word. You know what I mean? Like
pleasure.
pleasure,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, pleasure. And then, generally, not always, but
Yeah.
generally the first place it goes is like, oh, we're going to have sex,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And it's like,
Cock and pussy. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And there's just so much more to it than that. You know what I mean? And
There really is.
sitting in on the porch in the morning and enjoying a cup of coffee as the sun is rising, just being able to actually sit in that experience. I mean, that's deep pleasure,
Mm-hmm.
But I'm definitely, I was very purposeful about naming this, when I
Yeah.
did it. I mean, there's somatic everything, you know what I mean? It's become sort of a catchphrase and
It
kind of
is.
overdone. I understand that, but it does describe what I'm attempting to do in my work, which is exactly what it sounds like you're also doing, is to help people, give them the tools to like expand that experience of pleasure in life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
With whatever tool it is.
Yeah.
And I just really love the music piece that you have with that. It just is that doesn't, in my experience, doesn't get brought in enough, or or it might be brought in but it's very separated, like the sound healing. It's like a thing, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But the combination, and maybe you can talk about this a little bit, or maybe you already have, maybe you can just expand on the idea, whether it's in a retreat or just working with an individual, or just in life, how the integration of music, which is vibration, which is frequency, all of those kinds of things, how that is effective in this nervous system regulation
The opening up.
and
Yeah. They're
opening.
regulating. Well, well, it's the, what you mentioned, the vibration. There's a big component to that. When we sing, our vocal cords vibrate. We mentioned a moment ago, you talked about building up that energy, and, whether or not it's orgone, which is the energy, the name for the energy that Wilhelm Reich came up with, orgone energy. There's all those orgone accumulators and like orgone,
The things he went to jail for.
Yeah. So, but now they're using orgone for like those little pyramids and those materials that like interrupt EMFs and stuff like that, right? So, but that orgone, he coined that word. But chi, prana, it's building up that energy. And how do we activate that energy? Through vibrational frequency, through movement, through breath, through creativity. What is procreation? What is making life? It's creativity. Like, why does sex procreation feel so good? We're creating life. Even though, there's all these other things that are built up around it, ultimately that tension and release, that tension and discharge, that ignition of sperm meeting egg, the yin and the yang, like that is so juicy, and not even have to be intercourse based, but it's just so juicy to feel that power and the love and the abundance of the blessing of creation. And so vibration and singing, the reason why music is so powerful is because breath is music, and our bodies are music, and like the cosmos is music, and it's all vibration. And music is kind of, just like breath, like it's one of the most concentrated, you know, archetypal experiences or mechanisms for creating movement and joy and community and togetherness and connection. I mean, back to our most ancient selves, we used music to sing and to chant. We used it to communicate, and in language and between different tribes. I mean, there's like African tribes now, even still, that have like drumming and chants, that when one tribe travels over to another neighboring tribe, there's a drum jam, like a specific rhythm and a chant that says, we're coming in peace. We're friends. We're going to have a community together. And there's another drum jam chant that says, we're coming to kick your ass. Like they actually use music to correlate human experiences and to represent stuff. So that's why I'm so blessed and thankful that I have found this, this convergence of music and breath. Because look, when I have somebody who's like, we're doing breath work, they come, they really want to release, they want to like find, people will come and find me that want to find their inner voice. They want to like learn how to sing again, or they've always felt really insecure and they want to sing, but they just don't feel comfortable in their own skin and their own voice, So I'll come, your neurotypical adult who's, no specific diagnosis will come and they want that. They want to feel connected to their creativity and to their moonlighting and singing, and so,
Ian, I'm loving your excitement. I'm sorry. I just have to say that. Anyway, keep going. I just love it. Good energy.
So they will, they'll find me and they want to find their voice. And so we end up coming to this place where it's like, yeah, like part of the stifling is that you need to release this trauma, and we can do that through the breath, but that's scary. And so we can find a slight ease in leaning into more gradually, if that's the need, if that's where they're at, we can more gradually ease into their capacity to have robust affective emotionality. And we can give that a little bit more of a soft uncovering as opposed to chiseling away at it with a freaking hammer. We can, we can just more gently do it through the creative process, through singing, through like vocal exercises. So like earlier you said, well, you teach too, and you don't teach. And I was like, well, yeah, I do teach, because it's through the teaching of music that we can also tap into all of these other need areas. And it's like, so, it's almost sad that like we take these skill sets we have in our human worlds, it's like, they're so like fine, so narrow-minded, like this like tunnel vision, like, well, you're just learning how to play piano. But like when somebody comes to me for therapy, I might be teaching them how to play piano, but I'm doing it as a coach and therapist and educator, and it's holistic and integrative. And they're not just learning how to play piano, they're learning how to deal with distress tolerance, impulse control, fine motor skill development, fulfillment and self-actualization, and building their self-esteem, because like shit, they never thought they would have been able to play piano or sing an aria, but now they're singing it because they've been given an opportunity to not just nurture their skill acquisition, but to nurture their whole self through that creative process.
Right.
And so that's where the breath and the unveiling and the, it's that permission. So like I have a ton of young adults and youth who I work with, and their parents didn't seek me out, to work with their autism or to work with their learning disabilities or their whatever their circumstance is. Their parents didn't seek me out for breath work, right? But I'm able to bring the breath work into it non-intrusively because we're singing, because they're learning breath control, because they're learning how to sing these various vocal warm-up exercises. And in order for them to sing them well and to learn those skills, they have to learn how to sing, to breathe deep into their diaphragm. They need to learn how to take a full inhale, and to not go, I mean, you can't sing really long phrases if you just take a shallow, but if you go, la, la, di, da, da, and you take really big breaths, then you can activate longer musical phrases. I mean, so that's just an example of how the music therapy supports the breath work and how the breath work supports the creative process.
That's amazing. I mean that, personally, I've had some of the greatest experiences, and my first real understanding of how powerful breath is was through an acting class.
Yes.
I had to really do that whole thing. And, we've been talking a lot about like how you do this in group, how you work with people in therapy, and the work outside of yourself. But you're also a musician, and you record and you perform. Am I right?
That is correct. Yeah, I've been.
So I'd like to hear a little bit more about your own personal professional life, and then you also, I don't know if this has to do with it, but the new website that you just launched.
Yeah.
Is that what that's about?
Yeah. So I started playing guitar when I was 12. I got my first guitar from my uncle. I grew up with parents and an uncle who loved all the classic rockers and the old jazz. And so I grew up in a really musical household in that regard. But I got my first guitar when I was 12, started learning Cream and Hendrix and the Beatles and all that stuff. And then I went into learning how to play like Nirvana and Soundgarden and all the 90s grunge. I graduated high school in 97, but I started my first rock band when I was 16 and started playing locally in an original rock band, like original rock hip hop. It was actually like pop, funk, rock, and rapping. And I didn't rap, but I played guitar and sang. And so 16 started gigging, playing shows, and pretty much gigged and played shows all the way in Santa Rosa, California through high school, and then into my young adult life, went to junior college, then finally at 23 decided to go to Berklee College of Music and get my shit together and go for a degree. So that's kind of the creative muse, my art lives, is that I've always been a rocker, a jazzer, a funker, a blueser. I'm not classically trained. I was predominantly trained by ear and kind of more pop contemporary modalities. Like I did have teachers, I took lessons, but I wasn't like taught in a conservatory sense. I'm not a classical musician. And then since then, went to Berklee College of Music in Boston, and I've released, I think, 4 or 5 albums under my own namesake and my old band, which was called Infinite Frequency. I still have that outfit on the back burner, and I may release more creative works under that namesake, under the Infinite Frequency brand.
And people find that like on Spotify or something like that?
Yeah, I have albums on all the major digital music distribution sites like Spotify and Apple Music, and they're going to want to search for Ian Franklin, or some of the albums are Ian Franklin and Infinite Frequency, but if they just type in one of those or the other, they might find it. And then the best place to find it is on my new website, and the new website is ianfranklinmusic.com. And this website is not just about my art. So I have my company in California, which is called Bay Area Music Therapy. And I own and operate that company, and I manage a team of 5 board certified music therapists who are employed by that company. And they serve the whole greater San Francisco Bay Area. And they're mobile, remote practitioners, and they go out into the whole community in various demographics. Wow. And they provide music therapy. And then I have my global and Idaho-based organization that's called Center for Healing and Expression. And that is founded in the memory and collaboration of my mother. She had her first Center for Healing and Expression in the Fillmore District in San Francisco. She closed it up. Years later, she died. We had always dreamed about collaborating in a multimodal, breathwork-based, music-based capacity. And so she passed. And so then I was like, I got to like lean into this. And it's like always been a part of my legacy or it was part of my destiny to like keep her legacy going. So my wife and I opened up and actually continued by opening up a new Center for Healing and Expression in her memory here in Idaho. And we decided to do that also because I didn't want to be pigeonholed in just doing music therapy, because I'm more multimodal. So I opened up this other outfit so that I could bring in all of the expressive art therapies. Like you mentioned, your first access to the breath was through drama, through acting. Like, what a powerful vehicle for change, drama therapy. I mean, there's an actual degree in drama therapy. I mean, you could become a certified drama therapist too. Not that you need the certification, but just that drama and expression, right? So we opened up the Center for Healing and Expression so that we could bring in the multimodal kind of mesh of all creative, artistic arts, the art of healing, through creative, expressive modalities and breath. And so I have these 2 different companies, but I don't want the companies to be me, and I don't want to be the companies. So I just decided that as a part of my trajectory, I need to start elevating those companies to be their own thing and not bound to me being the CEO or the founder or the manager. And big picture, so I created the new website for just me as the coach. That's not either organization. And it's basically the common place where people can come and where I can start putting my energy into my art, my bands, my albums, my breath work, my coaching, my retreats, my virtual services, and my music therapy. So it's kind of a convergence website that's just my personal brand. That's what the coach tells me. I have a coach, and it's my personal brand. now everybody's doing their personal brand on Instagram and on all of the social ethers. So that's it. That's it. That's the story.
Oh, that's fantastic, Ian. Thanks for taking us through like the development and the
Yeah.
trajectory there. And again, what is the website again?
IanFranklinMusic.com.
Ian Fink. Okay.
Yeah, so I use my middle name as my artist name, but yeah.
Well, it makes it more distinct, I guess, to a certain extent, right?
Yeah, it's nice. It's kinder to the Marquise. No,
Kind of to what?
kinder to the Marquise. If I'm ever billed on like a
Oh, I
marquee or
see.
like to my last name's a little bit clumsier, I guess. I don't know. I just for a long time I felt like I had to keep my clinical professional self separate from my artist. So in my upbringing, for whatever reason, like not my upbringing, but as a younger professional, I felt like, oh, I have to, have these two separate hats and that they don't blend, but they do blend now. And that's been an evolution of myself, is that like, I used to literally, like, my albums are all Ian Franklin. There's no Wilkerson. There's no last name. And then my therapy clinical practitioner professional business cards and websites are just Ian Wilkerson. But now I'm like changed all the copy and language. It's Ian Franklin Wilkerson. I'm like, they got to come together.
Yay for integrated self, Ian.
Yeah. I'm like, Yeah.
Hey, well, listen, this is an amazing conversation. And I think I say this every time I interview somebody, but there's like 100,000 other threads that we can pick up on here and move this on. And hopefully you'll come on again and we can talk again in the future.
Love that.
That would be really neat. I've really enjoyed talking to you.
Less tangentially. No.
What's that?
I said less tangentially. No. a little bit more focused. No.
Well, I don't know.
On my behalf, I gotta I go all over the place. It's not your fault. I'm like, that's, I always, and I mean, I'll be asked like one little question and then I'll just like, whoosh.
Well, no, that's the beauty of this thing is, really it's easy for me, right? All I do is, especially with guys like you that are, that are very verbal and have a lot to say.
Very
and,
verbose.
I mean, quite frankly, it didn't feel like you were going off in weird.
Okay, good.
You just actually expanded the questions in a way that I think is very valuable to more people, really, honestly. So I'm just going to bring a last question to you here.
Okay.
If people listening take one thing from this conversation into their own body, what would you want that to be?
The one thing I want them to take into their one body, or the one share, is what my mom would always say in almost a joking but poking the bear way, is just breathe. Just shut up and breathe. That is what my mom would say.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just because we get in our own way. So the one thing I would invite people to take into their path, or to try to embrace or check in with, is this idea of just like getting out of your own way. And breathing. Breathe deep. Learn how to breathe. Pay attention to your breath. Pay attention to your diaphragm. Pay attention to how deep you breathe, and try to check in with that multiple times throughout the day, because we're just completely unaware. Me too. Like I have so much on my plate. I'm so busy and high strung all the time. And I'll be like, holy smokes, Ian, just breathe. Like, are you even breathing deep right now? My breath is so shallow. So just breathe.
Just breathe.
Yeah, that's it right there.
Ian, thank you so much for being on the show here and bringing your wisdom and your creativity and your high vibe energy. It's really neat to have it. And I'm looking forward to talking to you again down the road.
Likewise. Thank you so much, James. I'm really, really, really blessed to have been on your show. So thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you for once again tuning in to the Somatic Pleasure Podcast. If anything moved you or landed deeply or sparked a question, please be sure and leave a comment. And share this with all your friends and the folks you feel like might benefit from the information here. Please be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of the upcoming episodes. Every Friday, 10:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, and be sure to join the live Q&A afterwards. And if you want to keep this conversation going, please join us inside Pan's Sanctuary, a private community for seekers of truth, lovers of embodiment, and somatic mischief makers. Hope to see you there. Have a great day.